Hi, everybody. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Annie-B, for this phenomenal piece. It's the first time I've seen it beginning to end. So thanks to you and the cast. What a great experience. There's a lot to unpack here, but I was really thinking about the palimpsestic nature of the piece, all the layers of text that are in it. Two artists whose work I really admire, the French-American conceptual artist Guy de Cointet, upon this, whose play Five Sisters is based, but then Chekhov underneath this. Probably disingenuous to say I like Chekhov, because who doesn't? But can you talk a little bit about how you got to this material and how you worked with these different literary and other sources?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Henriette. The original text is, as Henriette says, is from Guy de Cointet, written in 1980, and he was a French visual artist who created this text, and it's collaged. He claims he wrote not one word, but he borrowed everything from advertisements and self-help TV shows and soap operas, and there's a monologue that Melville wrote, and there's a poem by Percy Shelley, and the original, so it's all collaged material. So he said, and we'll believe that, but it's, the Uber idea was, it's called the Five Sisters, so it's, and the scenario is exactly the same as the Chekhov's Three Sisters. So I just thought it would be, I would collage in more Chekhov, more Three Sisters, which just slips right in, no problem, because of the scenario. Like, you know, at one point in the Guy de Cointet, he said that one of the sisters says, I read a great deal. That's all she says. And then, but I added in the Vershinin text from Three Sisters, you know, but I don't know how to choose my books. I know so little, I know so little. And then another character says, don't read, don't read. That's all Chekhov, but it just slides right in because he's definitely referencing that world and the world of people, you know, very self-absorbed and living in this home, sort of isolated and thinking about their regrets and their desires and so forth. So I just had fun with adding it in places.
Right, yeah, and I mean, I think what I was thinking about a lot, it's quite interesting because Guy de Cointet is an artist who came out of a visual arts context primarily, even though he made performance and he put on theatrical pieces that don't really conform to conventional theatrical structure at all.
Yeah.
And I think in the realm of visual arts performance, even theatrical pieces, the room for artistic license with that material tends to be much smaller than in dramatic adaptations of plays, you know, where sometimes dramaturgs or directors change much of the text, you know, take out scenes and so forth. And I think in the art world, there tends to be like pretty much of a very close verisimilitude to the original text. And I think this is really sort of liberating to see somebody take this Guy de Cointet piece and then make it into something completely different. And of course, you also add your choreography, music, and you have transported us in this 1980s, early 80s Los Angeles house. How did you think about the movement and the choreography in relationship to your sources?
Just going back to the house, is our extraordinary set designer is actually in the house, Lauren Maschen, and incredible. And I think Lauren, I could speak for you to say that she and I and the lighting designer and the costume designer thought about all the tonalities of color and the sun that keeps being talked about and so forth. And the movement itself is, you know, it's like when you're a choreographer, you have, I don't know, like a whole, you know, decades of material that you've made. And it's just sort of in your body and in the dancer's body. And I had this idea that when I read this performance piece, I don't even want to call it a play, that he was referencing this idea that in your family, your bodies move in these very arcane systems with your siblings. And we're not even aware of it. You know, you have your own languages, physical languages, and sometimes you make up languages. We did in my family. and you have ways of sitting with your family, and you're often not talking and just moving and doing stuff, like sort of reiterative loops of tasks that you do together and so forth that you're just used to doing. So I just played with that, I think, and found ways to make it quite even more intensely arcane.
Yeah, and I really like that ritualistic sense in the private language that they have that threads throughout. But then, of course, they're also all united in these quite contemporary preoccupations with an environment that threatens. One of the sisters develops an allergy to the sun, which is recent. There are like, cleaning materials all over the stage.
Thank you,
They
Laura.
talk about modes of self-improvement and kind of a self-help, self-improvement culture, which I think is part of the reasons that you felt de Cointet's text was so fresh and so relevant.
It feels like he's really capturing, because he wrote this, 50 years ago, the very beginnings of the wellness movement, which, there's been through the centuries, there's been wellness movements. I mean, the spiritualists, in a sense, at the late 19th century, early 20th century, had this same kind of vibe of, wait, am I Eileen? No, I'm Rachel. No, I could be, that whole thing of, that there's some pride around understanding that there's other TV channels going on or whatever, other realms of thinking, of being. But he is really capturing that moment in California at the very dawn of Reaganism, which, is like, I feel like nobody talks enough about what Reagan did to us as a culture.
I think that is correct. It's also, I feel like Cointet is sort of putting a needle on a continuum of changing notions of the self that actually kind of thread through the 20th century, from ideas of the individual that was guided by notions of duty and service to a culture of self-actualization, which is, of course, deeply entwined with consumer culture, particularly US-style consumer culture, and then really, at the Reagan moment, coupled with deregulation and so forth, sort of morphs into the form that we're essentially
like
experiencing.
capitalism as a religion,
Yeah.
basically. And, I think before Reaganism, there was, of course, many problems in the country, but certainly there was a deeper sense of being a good citizen and living for the greater good. That was crashed by Reagan. And continually, through 9/11, we were told to go shop and, to be a good capitalist, to be a good consumer. And that has to do with the self-absorption. You have to, and it becomes weird. People become weird, they're just like pretty far out. And he captures that really well.
And there's that sort of that notion, and you have the which I think is a really kind of jarring moment in there, where Dolly talks about how they need to form a committee to help
the poor
people, and then walk off
duty.
and talk about your coconut water, in the next.
Well, that is
breath.
Chekhov. I stuck that in.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, some of the superfoods seemed a little, early 21st century, but yeah.
But the microbiome is early 21st century. That's true. Just snuck that in. But that feeling that we have this duty, it's for the greater good. Now I'll go take a nap.
Right. It's also, this idea, which I think is fairly ingrained in all of us. First of all, these notions of endless personal perfectibility. You do the right yoga, and eat the right foods or whatever, and then somehow, we're supposed to look young forever and live internally, which of course is not true. But then also, what is the point of that, really? What is, as that's sort of an aspirational goal in and of itself, which is exactly what you're saying about sort of buying into consumer culture as a religion.
And at the same time, and I was curious what you thought about this, he's definitely talking about the art world, when these people are obsessed with this color and the use of color and your paintings. And
right, and there's an actual painter in there. And then the sisters have this kind of snide side conversation where they are talking about the sister's work. Yes, I think, he's definitely, Guy de Cointet was moved to Los Angeles via New York, and then spent most of his life his adult life there, he passed away in 1983, was quite close to artists associated with CalArts. He influenced Mike Kelly, he influenced Paul McCarthy, Erica Beckman. So he was really very much in the LA art scene, but you can also see that adjacency, which I think is a facet of the LA art scene, to fashion, music, and the Hollywood industry, and some of his the people he cast, in these looks. But yes, I do think he is talking about the self-absorption of all of those creative cultures.
And almost taking art into a spiritual realm, where the color red becomes this sort of alchemy of the gods, or some sort of secret, thing. It's red. Oh my God, you're using red, And he's really, I think, critiquing that world, and the way certain people, related to the art world. He probably thought was pretty weird.
Probably.
It probably was.
It is weird. It is a very weird world. Yeah.
Me too.
Let's see. So I wanted to ask you about something. So one element that you added, which strikes me as an addition from the very recent past, is the mood room itself, the title of the work, and the mood room that appears throughout. What's the mood room in this?
Well, I changed the title to The Mood Room, it's true, but every other reference to the mood room is Guy de Cointet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly what if it's an image of death, or of the room where they keep their bongs, or just a retreat, I don't know.
But, I was looking this up, and then I saw something online in some interior design magazine, that the mood room was one of the big interior design trends of post 2020, because people spend so much time at home, so you need kind of your little sanctuary mood room where you can go to retreat.
That's amazing. No, I did not know this. So people are using that term now.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good to know. I need one.
Let's see, should we open it up to some questions from the audience? I think there are microphones available. We just need to wait a little bit. Somebody usually has a question.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say this was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Like every detail, from the set to the lighting to the concept to the execution. It really, thank you for bringing this to the Twin Cities, and thank you for making it.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, this seems like a very unprofound question considering the conversation, but I would love to know more about the set design and the...
Is Lauren here? Oh, Lauren, why don't you come and answer that? That would be great. We're so lucky.
Come on down.
She came from Los Angeles.
Yay! I mean, I am not an artist, so I don't know anything about the artistic process, so I think it's also just kind of magical and mysterious to me how you all brought this together, from the writing to the visualization to the movement, how all of these different forms of art and communication work together. I felt like, obviously I'm not going to speak for the rest of the audience, but I felt like I really, just reading the program and then watching it, and then hearing the discussion, I feel like I very much understood from this what I think was trying to be communicated, and I think that's really hard in, as an artist, you have an intention and you have, a vision and a purpose, but you never know how the audience is going to receive that. So I'd love to hear what other people thought and how they reacted to it, but especially visualizing kind of, how to, I just think this set is excellent. And the question was about the glass, sorry, the mirror. Because of the 80s, and the Los Angeles home setting, I really was like, oh, that's a cocaine glass table.
Oh,
And then
I love that you took it there.
that's what I thought. I was like, oh, they're
love
totally
that.
like gonna reference Coke at some point, or this is a Coke fueled scene or something. But then it was like a pond at times, and I just wanted to know more about how you ended up with that.
Yeah, tell us.
And everything about the set, I don't even know what to ask.
Yeah, well, thank you for your question. I mean, Annie B and I started this discussion. You were the one that wanted carpet.
Yeah.
That was the number one. We had a long discussion about, this is a home. I really reference 1960s, 1970s conversation pits. For me, that feels like coming into a space, a home space. These women are tethered to this space, and you might notice, like from their costumes, also with the color palette, they're sort of like rooted in the space. And I like to think of them as dinner mints, really, that palette. And that's what you would get served. Like I think my mother is here tonight, and my aunt and uncle. Hi, Mom. But I remember those dinner mints being in my grandmother's house, and that was very much a part of my childhood. And just the coziness of carpet, that feeling that you're rooting down in a space to keep them sort of tethered. And then the other interesting thing is there's how many entrances and exits.
Yeah, like 90.
So we were thinking about how to do that. How do you do that in an interesting way? Is it a light switch? At one point we were talking about, do they flick on and off? We're having to rack our brains like 5 years ago, because this is an old piece, like a piece that we started a long time ago. And then I just thought of the fringe, because I first began thinking about vertical blinds, because that was very present in that era. And then I was like, well, it has to be more interesting. And I love the dynamic of when they translate through, like from in front of the curtain, behind the curtain, what does that mean? How they play with the fringe and pass through the space to create more interest. So that was really, and you okayed it. Annie-B is a great creative partner to work with, because you loved everything.
Well, you're so good, Lauren. I'm so happy. This is Lauren's first theater piece, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you for having me be a part. And thank you for your question. I mean, I don't want to take up space. This is really about you. But if anybody has any other questions about the set, I will be wherever we're going after this. So thank you.
I want, thank you for asking that question about the set, but maybe another piece you should talk a little about is the music, which is by Holly Herndon, and how she was a collaborator.
Yeah,
on the
so
piece
Holly
too.
Herndon, I don't know if you all know her, but she came to the Walker because you have such an incredible programmer here a long time ago, and now she's at the Whitney Biennial, and she's just a giant composer that works with AI. She has an AI baby. She's had the AI baby for a really long time, which is her progeny. I can't explain that. I'm just telling you. It's a fact. I've always a big admirer of her work, and I had this idea that that if I could use her music, that it would almost be like another sister rather than background music, which kind of bugs me. So also I work in opera a lot now, so I'm very, very aware of the relationship between music and the audience is so much bigger in the opera than in dance, typically. So I love this idea of trying to kind of make an opera with Holly's music. Long story short, we ended up licensing 8 songs from her, and I asked her if I could make up a word, which I don't know if I really made up, called recomposition, where we would buy basically all the stems and the cells. So people that aren't music people, those are like the bits, the parts, what make up the music. And we could recompose the music in any way that we wanted. And she said, definitely yes, like she loved the idea. So it's a huge element in the tonality of the world that I was trying to create. As important as the colors, the color palette that Lauren and the costume designer came up with, the beiges, pinks, it's very, very limited. And these elements are just so expressive, and I hope that the audience is experiencing them as much as they are the text.
I have a question. Hi Annie. Thank you for being here. I'm Andy. I go to MCAD, and I'm currently working on a show with my friends called Girl Room, and we're kind of thinking about like girls' spaces and like kind of the collectibles and commodified memories that we're all like cherishing and abstracting, and I would love to hear your thoughts about like more of the space that is here tonight, and also just like these characters that are women and their like connection to the different objects in the space. So like more of the.
I love that question.
Thank you.
I have sisters, and it's very much a part of, you know, a sort of a female world of how I grew up. And the objects are really, really central, in fact, almost supernatural in a sense. And I tried to limit myself, because I tend to use a lot of props, but I was really, really trying to not. So I limited myself to this idea that there are glasses in your house, and people are always passing them around. And I would start to watch, you know, like television and watch people in their houses and notice how much they're passing glasses around, putting them down and picking them up and putting them down and picking them up and handing them to people. And I thought, well, maybe that's the only prop I let myself use. Basically, you know, I also used a stick, but that mostly there was a world where I was using a lot of stuff, objects that were very, very feminine. And then I sort of limbed away until I just got to glasses. But yeah, I'm really into working with objects, and I think they're really meaningful, and I draw objects a lot and stuff, so I appreciate your question. Good luck with your work.
Do we have another question?
Yes, you can.
Thank you for your work, and the performers were just absolutely striking.
Right.
I'm so curious, could you speak more to the process of coaching them in holding the text and the movement at the same time?
Well, we usually put the movement forward. We're working on the movement a lot, and then the text, I thought maybe we would try to approach it like an opera. So sometimes we're relating very much to what we're hearing, you know, but at the beginning. And then I just have like what I don't like with text in acting that makes me uncomfortable. So it's more like I like colors of ideas rather than playing out beats. So I think mostly we're trying to like simplify the way the text is being said, and to heighten it in certain places, like it's just one color, you know, it's yellow now, it's blue now, like that, rather than the way, you know, a more traditional acting would go. But the relationship between the movement and the text is often gestural, and then sometimes it has to do with space. So I constructed this, not for this piece, but a couple pieces back, this structure that I'm very attached to, which is that all punctuation has a certain amount of beats attached to it. So a comma is 3 beats, and a period is 4 beats, and so on. And then the performers have to count the 3 beats, you know. A comma is 3 beats. And what's your question? So they are counting in their head, and it's creates just this kind of magical space that I think is interesting, and I also find it's spatial. Yeah, sort of a complicated answer. Yeah.
There's a question.
Hi, Annie. I'm Erin. I went to school with you.
Erin Searchwell?
Yeah.
Hi.
I wanted to say that I got to read your book, and I wanted to thank you for writing it. And I wanted to ask you what the difference between that form is for you, having been making dance and theater for so long.
Well, when I wrote my book, I had the luck to be asked to write a book at the very beginning of COVID. So it was like, making a solo, basically. So I was really lucky because I had a project, really cool project, with an amazing editor. And I thought I would choreograph the page so you can see that there's a certain space between certain blocks of text, and then I would count the beats for the short lines. So they would be like a percussive thing. So I like it when a line has 5 beats. So when I could keep a line to, like I would have a block of text, and then I would have a space, and then I mean, you read it, so I'm sure this sounds familiar. Then I'd have 5 beats to a line. If I couldn't say it in 5 beats, sometimes it would be 6, but it'd be around 5 or 6. And so that was sort of extremely choreographic because there's all the compositional elements of choreography: rhythm, space, time, breath, shape. All those things are there on the page. So that was my approach, and it really helped me to not worry about writing because I'm not a writer. It's not my training. So I never really worried about it because I felt like I was thinking about the things that actually I do every day in choreography.
Maybe we'll take one more question.
I am wondering about inspirations for the piece. I thought this reminded me a lot of Einstein at the Beach or stuff from Half Straddle and Tina Stater. And I'm curious
Tina's a friend of
what you
mine.
pull
I mean,
from.
she was in the very first little section of this. And Kate Moran was in Einstein on the Beach, the person that plays Maria. There are a lot of, I also am very inspired by, I was saying to Philip today that, Richard Foreman is absolutely one of my favorite choreographers. And so is, Richard Foreman and Robert Wilson are both, I would say both of them are my favorite choreographers. I can't really pick which. So you would definitely feel that influence or excitement. And I'll tell Tina you said that about Half Straddle. That's cool. She's more the generation behind me, but a lot of the performers from from Big Dance ended up working with her later. So we're very connected and friends. Yeah. It's definitely, I like the idea that there's artists, even if we're not named anything, that are very, very, we're friends and very related. And not that I know, I have had an experience working with Wilson a tiny bit and have never worked with Richard Foreman, but I saw so much of Richard Foreman's work. And so it's definitely in there. The inspirations. Really, one of my main inspirations, I know this is going to sound completely weird, was Jesus. Because I was reading the Gnostic Gospels when I made this. So I notated all the movements of Jesus, and that's some of the movement score is that. I'm not saying there's any spiritual relationship. Obviously, it's quite opposite. But you know how inspirations go, they don't really make any sense.
That's, I think, is ending on it. Yes, on a very good note.
You're crazy.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you,
you.
Annie-B.